I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on the Crypto Coin Show we have Josh D'Ambrosio, Chief Commercial Officer from Banksa. Josh, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time today.
Hi Ashton, thank you so much for having me here. It's going to be a real pleasure.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to dive into what Banksa is working on in helping mainstream adoption of cryptocurrencies, not just in 2023, but for many years now, as I've heard a little bit about the history of Banksa, and you guys have been around for a few cycles. I'm very much looking forward to more mainstream adoption through all these different use cases that Web3 is moving into that was previously untouched. And we're still so early on. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, as you said, we've been around since 2014, so it's not our first rodeo. We've seen many ups and downs, and most importantly, we've seen that adoption cycle, both from a increase in number of users, but also like the evolving space from actual onboarding and the UX and the regulatory and payment infrastructure that's had to evolve and grow with it. So I've got some hairy stories to share, as well as what's really shaping as a nicer outlook for the future of onboarding and crypto adoption.
Sounds great. Well, let's just kick it off from a high level, Josh. For those people who haven't heard about the payment processing or they're not familiar with Banksa, what is Banksa to start us off, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So Banksa really provides tooling, widgets, APIs, etc. To Web3 platforms, so wallets, exchanges, dApps, to enable their end users to buy and sell cryptocurrencies and NFTs within their platform. And really, our core focus has always been building enterprise-grade core payments and regulatory infrastructure to ensure that we can reach the most number of users globally, and also convert them with all of the local payments and per the local regulatory requirements, to make sure that onboarding process can be as seamless as possible for the end user. And then on that platform side, really to make sure the tooling is as easy to really just embed and get up and running, and so they don't have to worry about any of the regulations or the payments or the fraud or all the hard stuff that we've been building over the last 9 years now. So 2023, 9 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy, and I'm impressed. There's not a lot of Web3 companies that started in way back, before Ethereum and in the early days of Web3, and are still doing very successful. What do you think is some of the keys to success in how Banksa is continuing to grow and thrive now?
Yeah, I think it's really from an early stage. We're quite lucky, actually. So the company was founded out of Australia, and Australia was the second country globally, I believe, to adopt any sort of cryptocurrency legislation. I think it was second after Japan. And so even before that, there was a few years of obviously planning for that, but we've had a really core belief in that, building the foundations correctly with an outlook that regulation will continue to come into this space and really shape it, will hold us in good stead to make sure that we build foundational core infrastructure that can be used and adapted in many ways as the space evolves. Like all good companies in this space, I think it's all about doing the right thing and not just trying to ride an immediate short-term wave per any given cycle, if that makes sense.
No, I completely agree, and I always tell people, especially if they're investing or if they have a startup, it's not an overnight success. You got to think long term, and the smartest investors think long term. And even almost 10 years now from when Banksa started, that's the Web3 industry is still still the innovators joining, and we're not getting close to the early majority yet. So there's still so much room for growth, and I feel like 2023 could be a big year where a bunch of new industries that hadn't touched Web3 before become interested and get involved, and they're going to need fiat on-ramps to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting how the whole onboarding and I guess the on and off ramps have evolved since those early days. As I mentioned earlier, there are some hairy stories when we first started getting up and running in just out of Australia locally in 2014. It was insanely hard, and even to this day, to some extent, it's insanely hard just to get a bank account to allow end users to actually deposit funds into. And we've had to solve that problem time and time again in every single country that we've expanded into. And thankfully, it's starting to take a little bit more shape. There's a little bit more understanding of what good governance looks like for a company that would look to do on and offboarding for fiat on and off ramping. Obviously, some regulatory frameworks that have come into play have really added substance to that. But I mean, the outlook is super bright. So it's awesome. In the last sort of year, we've seen NFT adoption and be recognized as digital goods, just from a payments point of view, because that really opens the door for really creative opportunities of how users can buy and sell both, fungible and non-fungible assets. You see a lot of the big sort of, traditional payment companies like Visa dabbling in this space. They did a really cool proof of concept a few weeks ago that they announced with account abstraction and automatic direct debiting of the cards. So it's really enabling use cases that exist in the kind of the Web 2 world now are available in that Web 3 space, which, while they're kind of cool proof of concepts right now, I think it's going to be really the leading charge of what's going to drive that next kind of bull run in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. That's very exciting. And you touched on at the beginning about the user experience, and I feel like that's needs to be one of the keys to mainstream adoption. People aren't just going to use these platforms because it's Web3, but it's way harder and clunkier to use. It needs to be as good of an experience or better. Now, maybe you could give me a walkthrough or an example of, say I'm somebody that's in Canada or in the US and I don't own any Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies and I want to get my first digital assets. How easy is it and how quickly can I get that through Banksa?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so as I mentioned, we partner with a lot of the Web3 platforms. So the exchanges, the wallets, the dApps, and we provide our tooling to them so they can allow their users to buy and sell cryptocurrencies with a variety of global payment methods. And so I guess, to give you an example of how an end user can then benefit from that. So maybe they would go to the App Store on their phone, they download one of the wallets we've been integrated into. So for example, Edge Wallet is, I think, actually our first partner back in the day. Wow. So long-standing partner, very popular globally. And then, they set up their account in Edge, very simple kind of Web 2 experience where you sign up with your email address just to secure and authenticate your account in there. And then, you jump in and you can click buy and you can start purchasing or selling your first pieces of cryptocurrency. And so when you click buy, you get taken to the Banksa widget to then select, how much you'd like to buy, which payment method you would like to select. And I guess in your example, if you were to say, you're from Canada or from the US, most critically for Banksa is that we look to provide those local payment rails relevant to those local markets. So for Canada, we would offer Interact. For the US, we'd offer ACH and wire transfers and copy paste for every other country we look to operate in. And the core benefit there for us, and first and foremost in terms of a UX, it's really just to get the basics right. It's if you're on an e-commerce website, is the payment method available that you can pay with, first of all, and is the one that you prefer to pay with available? And then secondly, does it actually work? And those might seem like some super basic problems to solve, but that's actually been the core problem just from a payments point of view historically. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, we've done some really hard work to solve for that. And then the next part is very much that user experience of how do you actually go through the flow and educate that user to make it very simple, very clear, what they're buying, what the next steps are, how to secure their assets, etc. And so I think, as you said, really making sure that user experience is become super seamless and really an equivalent of a Web 2 or a very sort of natural experience for that upcoming adoption cycle. I think that's really going to unlock the future potential of the space.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I agree. And I'm curious, how was 2022 for Banksa? And as we've seen through the industry as a whole, there was a lot of crashes and bankruptcies of cryptocurrency exchanges and yield generating providers, and the price decline naturally in these cycles. 2022 was that year that the prices declined. Did you see less people buying their first assets, or are people saying, could you see it's on sale, I should buy more? Or did that affect the sales at all of Banksa?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the start, we've been around since 2014, so it's not our first sort of boom and bust cycle. It's probably our third third or fourth bear market now. And every time it's a similar case. You get a lot of user adoption, obviously, in those bull market phases. Lots of new users coming on board, and like a real explosion at the peak. It does dwindle as that sort of starts to subside, and you get less new users, but you still get quite a few coming in looking to get some cheaper prices. And then 2022 overall, definitely obviously a down year across the whole industry. We definitely saw less new users coming on board. We saw a lot of people wanting to continue return purchases, and so that user retention for a lot of the platforms became quite a critical piece. And so making sure that their users had that seamless access, and they didn't want to lose them to other competing platforms. And I think what we're actually seeing and getting some feedback as well at the moment from a few of our various partners in different segments is there's actually a shifted focus again back to some of the institutional clients. So given there's less retail users coming on board right now, that aren't already here, that they're really looking to sort of amplify their efforts on serving that institutional or family office type space for on and off ramping, which I personally find interesting. Is how some of these platforms are looking to, I guess, ride through that bear market, and what the customer segments they want to be focusing on are.
Definitely very interesting. And yeah, that makes sense that there was a slight decline, but I'm sure that the cycles will continue cycling, and eventually we'll be back. Now, Josh, I'm also curious about, how do you continue to grow? And I feel like Fiat on and off ramps, just as traditional payment processing with Visa and MasterCard, it's very cutthroat. There's obviously other on-ramp platforms that you're competing with and different payment processors, potentially even Visa and MasterCard joining in with the group. How do you have a competitive advantage? Do you just get the right partners? Do you try to lower the percentages of the costs that it takes? Or what else can you take to stay ahead in that industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you said, it's super difficult, and it's a really difficult space to navigate. So really the focus for us has been acquiring as many regulatory licenses in local jurisdictions as possible. Our overall thesis has always been that regulation will continue to shape this industry for years to come. And I think the FTX saga has probably supercharged or fast-tracked those efforts, hopefully for the better. But what that means is, I think longer term, in order to provide that critical, I guess, gateway from fiat, from the old world into the new world of crypto, regulation is always going to play some part in each country going forward. And that in order to serve customers in those countries, you will need local crypto registrations and licensing in those markets to serve them. Now, historically and even today, a lot of exchanges, even a lot of our competitors, they typically serve customers globally just out of one or maybe two countries on this what's known as a reverse solicitation basis, whereas our goal is to really go in and get the local license for each country so that we can serve those local customers. It's probably looked at, I guess, from that point of view as a little bit of a grey area or an evolving space while that licensing piece is sort of getting sorted out and acquired. But longer term, our view is if you want to serve customers in each country, you do need the local license. And I think Brazil is a great example. So we've gone and set up our operations there, and legislation recently went through a couple of weeks ago. And what that means, just in terms of, I guess, competitive advantage, is that then creates a barrier to entry for any of our competitors who aren't already set up in that country. So they'll need to go through a long licensing process to get up operational and to be able to serve the Brazilian market, whereas we've done all the hard yards of setting up all of our operations. We know right now we're in Australia, Canada, US, Brazil, Turkey, Netherlands, Lithuania, Philippines, and a few more on our roadmap for this year. And so that really allows us to serve those markets properly, and for that long-term success with the partners that we work with. But most importantly, actually, and sorry, just to then get into the actual payments. So in order to offer the local payment methods in these countries, credit cards aren't that popular in all countries, which may surprise some people, and access the bank rails, that's what we need to have those licenses. And then that makes the experience as cheap as using a local exchange, so that you're paying 0% rather than an extra 2% for credit card purchases, which I think is going to be really that critical adoption piece and seamless user experience. So yeah, I guess to answer your question in a very long-winded way, it's really to sort of do that foundational work of building out the regulatory licensing and payments infrastructure to make sure we can access the most customers and convert the most customers. And then on top of that, at a product and UX level, it's really how do we unlock all of the use cases and make sure that our tooling is best in class to allow users to buy and sell what they want. And so I guess a lot of work that we've done over the last year is that we have this core belief that being able to convert fiat to both fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens is going to be here to stay. And so making sure that we can provide our tooling to unlock both of those. And in some cases, gaming's a great segment as an example, that you will have NFTs in there, but you also might have an in-game fungible token for, the money of that game. And so you do need to be able to convert to both assets. And I think we're actually the first to market to launch our NFT checkout back in April last year with Atomic Hub. And so we've really tried been looking to be that product leader as well in terms of unlocking new feature sets for this adoption piece.
I really like that answer, Josh, and I was going to ask you about the other countries and global expansion as well. And I can imagine how difficult it must be to get individual licenses and all of these different currencies around the world, different jurisdictions and regulations, and to have a leg up on that. Obviously, that would be a huge competitive advantage. And it's interesting to hear about Brazil. I've also seen a lot of movement in Turkey as well. So it's great to hear that Banksa is already involved in those countries. How do you determine, where to move? Like which country next? What's the criteria on this country is experiencing hyperinflation, maybe we should go over there, or this country is ready to buy crypto. How do you know where to expand?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, and it is very difficult. There's many different layers and variables that we look at. Historically, we are naturally let ourselves make sure that we were really strong in our core markets of Australia, Canada, US, Europe, a lot of the Western markets. That's where the team had been based, I guess, in previous years. And then from an expansion point of view, you're really kicking off about 2.5 years ago. We really begun to look at a few different things. So where's the market going? Where is that adoption piece really taking place? And what are the use cases? Like what sort of services do the people in those markets really need? And so that's sort of at a market level. Then obviously speaking to our partners, what do they see as really a key, or where is their user base? And so what are their needs from an on and off ramping capability? And then obviously also our own internal data showing what are our users demanding, what sort of feature sets. But I think the use cases is the most interesting. So what are those users looking to use to buy and sell for? Historically, it's really been focused obviously on like that investment case and that speculation case, hoping to buy an asset that then goes up in value. But the beauty of and I guess really why we're all here from a crypto point of view is to unlock even greater use cases than that. So whether it might be for payments or whether it's remittance for cross-border sending of money from one person to another. Even again, the gaming piece is super interesting. So like that play to earn piece, people are looking to earn, I guess, some sort of income in these games, but quite often they want to then get paid out into fiat in their local currency. And so we really took the analysis from that point of view. And I think what we're really seeing is strong demand is, the emerging markets around APAC and as well as LATAM is really fulfilling a lot of those core use cases. And then Turkey was a good one that you mentioned, just from an adoption point of view. I think it was, I have to check the stats, but it was definitely up there in the sort of top 5, top 10 countries start of last year, particularly from a currency devaluation point of view. So we saw it as quite critical to help really unlock crypto for that market.
Great insights, Josh. And speaking of use cases, you touched on it a few times there about GameFi, NFTs in games. That's such a huge market. Even the market cap of gaming is like almost, it's bigger than that of cryptocurrencies. Millions and millions of people, hundreds of millions, play games around the world. And the narrative that started in the last couple of years of all of the in-game items going to become NFTs, it sounds amazing, but it's not an overnight process, especially for games that they want to create Web3 experience from the get-go. Some of these games take a few years to develop. A good game takes a few years and a few $1 million to develop. And I feel like we really haven't broken through into actually having those in in games that are really good, that are actually going to be used by millions of people, that they need that fiat on-ramp. I feel like that's a great opportunity for Banksa to not just have people that are gaming and be able to move back to their currency, but to start buying NFTs for the purpose of playing games. Great.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely like a really big emerging segment that we are keeping our eyes on.
Go ahead.
And sorry, and so gaming. We've really, I guess, split up our outlook into the different segments of the market. Gaming is definitely one of those bigger emerging segments, and I think we look to build out the infrastructure and the product sets that can enable us to support them. And so, as I said before, I think in-game tokens, which are your fungible tokens, offering global and enterprise-grade on and off-ramping capability for them is critical. Offering the NFT checkout both for primary sales of NFTs as well as the secondary sales, which are typically integrated into some of these through some sort of marketplace or other infrastructure provider. Maybe even something like an immutable would be a great example. That's also a critical element. And then I think from a payments point of view, making sure, like, if we understand that play to earn is going to be critical and therefore allowing off ramping to those emerging markets where the earners are actually located is critical. So I guess what we're looking at doing is just understanding the needs of these different segments, and gaming is one example. Obviously, like DeFi is another example, the wallets, etc. And then just making our underlying core infrastructure fairly agnostic in terms of what segment it's serving, but to really enable use cases, and it's on and off ramping in any given market at certain sizes, whether it's microtransactions, recurring payments, and then whether it's a fungible token versus a non-fungible token. So it's really unlocking any sort of use case that any platform can then build on top of, and really just acting as that layer to allow the creators to be creative and not let our sort of limited thinking dictate what can be built on top of us.
I really like that approach. And now, Josh, we're at the beginning of 2023, and hopefully, this is an amazing year for Web3, and we really break into a lot of new industries, and that's definitely going to require some fiat on-ramps as well. What do you think are some of the main initiatives that Banksa should finish up by the end of 2023, whether it's just expansion or partners or gaming, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think just from our core product offering, we will definitely look to further capitalize on where we already see ourselves as leaders. And so that will be more licenses in more countries. And therefore, as a result, we will continue providing the most direct payment methods, both for on-ramping and more critically, actually off-ramping. And maybe I'll just touch on that off-ramping piece. Historically, it hasn't been a super popular feature for many platforms to integrate, but as we're seeing greater utility and opportunity for new use cases emerge, and I really like to point at that remittance one as a massive more industry in the traditional world already. The off-ramping is a critical component to that, and so enabling payments for off-ramping in many emerging markets is going to be critical to that success. So I think you can expect to see a lot more payments coming out from Banksa. And then we'll definitely be looking to make sure that our core infrastructure continues to be the best in class, just from a conversion and durability and support point of view. And then I guess just from a new sort of where's the space going, really looking to unlock how do we make the experiences in these sort of non-custodial and decentralized environments more seamless. And so what we're seeing, I guess, is probably a big shift from user demand from the centralized exchanges, as of post FTX, to those decentralized exchanges and other sort of DeFi dApps. And there are different problems to solve from a UX perspective in those. And it's how do we take what we've historically been best in the industry at from an on and off ramping place from the centralized exchanges and unlock that capability for the decentralized exchanges. And we've already had great success working with DYDX, GMX, 1inch, and what we're really looked at we think we've got a good sort of idea of how that will play out. It's really making that a really seamless experience so that that user adoption. They don't really need to know whether on a centralized or decentralized exchange, but it's all about what does that enable. And then probably the last point I'd make is we probably do expect to see a lot more of the Web2 or traditional companies enter this space, and we've been doing a lot of work with them in the background. So we worked with LG, for example, to enable them to enable on and off ramping in some of their products that they've been working on, and we're probably expecting to see more companies, not just that sort of consumers type companies, but also sort of payments companies, traditional finance companies try to enter this space and unlock cryptocurrency on and off ramping, as well as just crypto adoption with their products. And it's how can we help support them with the infrastructure that we've built out over the years.
Incredible. Well, those are some great partnerships and initiatives. I'm looking forward to it, and let's hope that the markets are in our favor in 2023, and it's all uphill from here. So thank you so much, Josh, for taking the time to come on to explain about the Fiat on and off ramps and all the different jurisdictions that we're seeing, all these new countries entering into the Web3 space. It's very exciting. Appreciate you taking the time. All the best with Banksa throughout 2023 and beyond, and let's follow up in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Ashton. Take care.